It is February 2026. The sun is beating down on the deep, protected waters of Cockburn Sound in Western Australia. At HMAS Stirling, the Australian Navy's primary base on the Indian Ocean, the usual fleet of diesel-electric submarines and Anzac-class frigates are tied up at the wharves. But out in the Channel, a different kind of silhouette breaks the surface of the water. It is massive. It is pitch black, covered in thousands of anechoic acoustic tiles designed to absorb sonar waves. It has no exhaust ports for diesel engines because it doesn't burn fossil fuels. It is powered by a pressurized water reactor that will never need to be refueled for the entirety of its 25-year lifespan. As it glides toward the pier, the flag snapping in the Australian wind isn't the Australian white ensign, and it isn't the stars and stripes. It is the white ensign of the British Royal Navy. This is HMS Anson, an Astute-class nuclear-powered fleet attack submarine. It is one of the most complex, stealthy, and lethally armed apex predators ever constructed by human hands. To the casual observer, this might look like a friendly port visit, a photo opportunity for admirals to shake hands. To the strategic planners in Beijing, sitting in the Central Military Commission thousands of miles away, this is the manifestation of their ultimate geopolitical nightmare. For decades, the adversaries of the free world assumed that the European powers were decaying. They assumed that the British military had been hollowed out by budget cuts and domestic politics, forever confined to patrolling the North Sea and the Mediterranean. They bet their entire grand strategy on the assumption that if a war kicked off over Taiwan or the South China Sea, the United States Navy would be forced to fight alone. The arrival of the HMS Anson in Australia, preceded by the massive deployment of a British carrier strike group to Japan, proves that assumption is dead. The Anglosphere has awakened, and the historic European naval superpower is projecting lethal, uncompromising force halfway across the globe. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are dissecting the strategic resurgence of the Royal Navy and why Britain is preparing for a Pacific War. Here is the thesis for this episode. You cannot win a global conflict with a regional navy. China has built the largest navy on Earth by hull count, but their strategy relies on isolating their enemies. The West is refusing to be isolated. We are forging an integrated, interchangeable war machine that spans the globe. If you pick a fight in the Western Pacific today, you aren't just facing the United States Pacific Fleet. You are facing a unified wall of allied steel. We are going to break down the tip of the spear, the permanent deployment of British nuclear submarines to Australian shores under AUKUS. We are going to analyze Operation High Mast, the colossal 40,000 nautical mile projection of the British carrier strike group. And we are going to dive deep into the plug-and-play naval doctrine, how cross-decking F-35 stealth fighters between American, British, and Japanese ships is changing the mathematics of naval warfare forever. If you are starting to grasp why the presence of a British nuclear submarine in the Indian Ocean fundamentally alters the balance of power in Asia, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We are breaking down the alliances, the logistics, and the hardware that secure the rules-based order. Your support ensures we can keep delivering this level of hard-hitting strategic analysis. Now let's look at the boat that is making Beijing sweat. The arrival of the Anson. Let us return to HMAS Stirling in February 2026 and the arrival of the HMS Anson. To understand the strategic shockwave this event generated, you must first understand the lethality of the platform itself. The Astute-class submarine is not a relic of the Cold War. It is a modern marvel of hydrodynamics and nuclear engineering. Displacing over 7,400 tons when submerged, the Anson is designed for two primary missions: hunting and killing enemy submarines and projecting devastating land attack firepower from the shadows. Inside its hull, it carries up to 38 heavyweight weapons. This includes the Spearfish torpedo, a weapon so fast and so powerful it can literally break the keel of a 10,000-ton destroyer in a single hit. It also carries the Block V Tomahawk land attack missile, TLAM, allowing the submarine to strike command and control bunkers, airfields, and port facilities with pinpoint accuracy from over 1,000 miles away, while remaining completely submerged and undetected. But the most dangerous weapon on the Anson is its stealth. Thanks to advanced vibration isolation mounts, specialized propulsors, and advanced acoustic dampening, it is reputed to be quieter than a baby dolphin. It can sit off the coast of an adversary, vacuuming up electronic intelligence, mapping the acoustic signatures of enemy fleets, and waiting for the order to strike, completely invisible to surface radars and highly resistant to advanced sonar. For decades, the United Kingdom kept these assets clustered around the North Atlantic, tracking Russian boomers slipping out of the Kola Peninsula. Deploying one to Western Australia is a tectonic shift. It proves that the rhetoric of the AUKUS Treaty was not just hot air. AUKUS Pillar 1 dictated that before Australia could build its own nuclear submarines, the US and the UK would forward deploy their own. With the arrival of the Anson, AUKUS became real, kinetic and active. SRF West, the undersea chokehold. This brings us to the operational framework. Submarine Rotational Force West, SRF West. This is the critical detail that changes the geometry of the Indo-Pacific. HMS Anson is not in Australia for a weekend port call to resupply on fresh vegetables and beer. It is there as part of a permanent rotational deployment. SRF West means that going forward, up to 4 U.S. Virginia-class submarines and 1 UK Astute-class submarine will be based out of HMAS Sterling continuously. Why does this matter? Geography. If a British submarine operates out of Foz Lane in Scotland, it takes weeks to transit to the Indo-Pacific. By the time a war breaks out over Taiwan, a submarine leaving the UK would arrive long after the decisive early battles were fought. By basing the Anson in Western Australia, Britain has effectively placed a loaded gun directly against the jugular vein of the Chinese economy. Look at the map. The sea lanes that connect China to the oil fields of the Middle East and the markets of Europe pass directly through the Indonesian archipelago. The Malacca Strait, the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait. These are narrow, deep-water choke points. An Astute-class submarine operating out of Perth is only days away from these critical straits. If a conflict begins, the HMS Anson and its American counterparts can immediately seal those straits. They can create an impenetrable undersea barrier, sinking any Chinese naval vessel or state-owned tanker attempting to enter the Indian Ocean. This is the ultimate expression of sea denial. China has built a massive surface fleet, aircraft carriers, cruisers and destroyers, but they remain highly vulnerable to advanced Western nuclear attack submarines. By committing to SRF West, the Royal Navy is proving that it is willing to commit its most scarce, high-value and lethal assets to the defense of the Indo-Pacific. It is a profound statement of geopolitical intent. Britain views the security of the Pacific as synonymous with its own national security, and they are willing to put their premier hunters in the water to prove it. The 40,000-mile armada. While the silent service operates in the shadows, true geopolitical messaging requires something much louder, much bigger and impossible to ignore. It requires the physical manifestation of sovereign industrial might. Enter the British Carrier Strike Group, CSG, and its monumental 2025 deployment to the Indo-Pacific, often referred to in strategic circles under the umbrella of long-range projection exercises like Operation High Mast. In 2025, the Royal Navy didn't just send a frigate to show the flag. They sent an armada. At the heart of this megafleet was the HMS Prince of Wales, a 65,000-ton Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carrier. This is not a light helicopter carrier, it is a supercarrier. It is the largest warship ever built for the Royal Navy. Its 4 acres of sovereign British territory serve as a floating, mobile airfield capable of projecting 5th-generation air power anywhere on the planet. But a carrier never sails alone. The 2025 deployment demonstrated the sheer, uncompromising scale of British naval power. The Prince of Wales was escorted by a ring of steel, Type 45 Daring-class destroyers, equipped with the Samson radar and Sea Viper missiles to provide an impenetrable anti-air warfare umbrella, Type 23 anti-submarine frigates to hunt down hostile contacts, an Astute-class submarine prowling beneath the surface, and crucially the massive Royal Fleet Auxiliary, RFA, Tide-class tankers and solid support ships. This flotilla embarked on an 8-month, 40,000 nautical mile journey from Portsmouth, through the Mediterranean, across the Indian Ocean, through the contested waters of the South China Sea, all the way to Japan and down to Australia. The logistical requirements for this deployment are staggering. You are feeding thousands of sailors, maintaining complex gas turbine and electric propulsion systems, supplying aviation fuel for a wing of F-35B stealth fighters, and managing the munitions and spare parts for half a dozen warships, all while operating 10,000 miles away from your home base. There are perhaps only 3 nations on Earth capable of launching, sustaining, and recovering a fully integrated, self-contained carrier strike group across the globe: the United States, France, and the United Kingdom. By executing this deployment seamlessly, the Royal Navy proved that its logistical tail is as strong as its combat teeth. They proved they do not need to rely on host nations for survival. They brought their own fuel, their own food, and their own firepower. The end of the regional navy myth. The strategic impact of this deployment cannot be overstated. For the Chinese Communist Party, witnessing a massive European armada sailing through the Philippine Sea was a severe psychological blow. Beijing's entire diplomatic and military strategy in the 21st century has been predicated on dividing the West. They believed they could peel Europe away from the United States. They utilized economic coercion, Belt and Road investments, and diplomatic pressure to convince European capitals that the Indo-Pacific was not their problem. Taiwan is a regional issue, Beijing argued, stay out of it. The Chinese strategic community widely propagated the myth that the Royal Navy was a shadow of its former self, a regional navy bogged down by budget constraints and domestic obsolescence. They pointed to the decommissioning of the Harrier jump jets in 2010 and the temporary lack of British aircraft carriers as proof of terminal decline. The HMS Prince of Wales, launching fully armed F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters over the South China Sea, incinerated that myth. It proved that the United Kingdom is back. It proved that Britain has reconstituted its carrier strike capability and that it possesses the political will to project that capability directly into the teeth of China's anti-access/area denial A2/AD network. When the British fleet docked in Yokosuka, Japan, and engaged in high-end warfighting exercises with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force and the U.S. 7th Fleet, the message was unequivocal. Britain is not retreating from the world stage. It is doubling down on its historic role as a global maritime enforcer. The megafleet deployment demonstrated that in a potential conflict, the PLA Navy would not just be facing the U.S. Pacific Fleet. They would be facing the combined industrial and operational might of the entire Anglosphere. Interchangeable lethality. Having ships in the same ocean is one thing. Actually fighting together in a chaotic, high-intensity conflict is entirely different. Historically, multinational coalitions have struggled with a fatal flaw: incompatibility. In past wars, British ships couldn't communicate securely with American aircraft. French munitions didn't fit in Australian cannons. Every nation fought in its own silo, severely limiting the combat effectiveness of the alliance. The West recognized this vulnerability. And during the 2025 Indo-Pacific deployment, they unveiled the solution. They showcased a doctrine that is terrifying military planners in Beijing: the plug-and-play war machine. This isn't just about interoperability, the ability to talk to each other. It is about interchangeability, the ability to seamlessly swap assets, personnel and munitions across national boundaries as if they were a single unified force. The ultimate symbol of this doctrine is the F-35B Lightning II. The B variant is the short takeoff and vertical landing (STOVL) model designed to operate from the ski-jump decks of British carriers and the flat tops of American amphibious assault ships. During the Pacific deployments, the world witnessed an unprecedented level of integration. United States Marine Corps F-35B squadrons were not just flying alongside British jets. They were fully integrated into the British Air Wing. U.S. Marines were living, briefing, launching, and fighting from the deck of the HMS Prince of Wales and its sister ship, HMS Queen Elizabeth. But the cross-decking went further. British F-35Bs practiced touching down and rearming on American flat tops like the USS America. And in a truly historic milestone, Allied F-35Bs conducted cross-deck operations with the Japanese JS Izumo, a vessel recently converted into a true aircraft carrier. The mechanics of this are breathtakingly complex. It means that the aviation fuel connections, the munition hoists, the deck management protocols, and the landing signals are completely standardized across 3 different sovereign navies. If a British aircraft carrier suffers battle damage to its flight deck during a conflict in the Philippine Sea, its air wing doesn't have to ditch in the ocean. The British pilots can simply divert to a U.S. Navy assault ship, or a Japanese carrier, land safely, refuel, rearm with American or Japanese weapons, and launch back into the fight. The borderless Navy. This interchangeability extends deep into the digital realm. The true lethality of the Western Alliance lies in its shared data networks, primarily the Multifunction Advanced Data Link (MADL), used by the F-35 and the broader Link 16 network. These secure, jam-resistant waveforms allow Allied forces to fuse their sensors into a single omniscient kill web. Imagine this scenario: a British Royal Navy Type 45 destroyer is patrolling off the coast of the Philippines. Its incredibly powerful Samson radar detects a swarm of incoming Chinese anti-ship cruise missiles. However, the British ship has expended its interceptors. Because of the plug-and-play architecture, the British destroyer doesn't panic. It instantly beams the precise, fire control quality tracking data through the network. An American Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, sitting over the horizon and completely blind to the incoming swarm, receives the British data. The American ship launches its SM-6 missiles, blindly firing over the curvature of the Earth, relying entirely on the British radar to guide its weapons to the kill. They are fighting as one organism. A British eye guiding an American fist to protect a Japanese carrier. This level of integration fundamentally breaks the math of naval warfare for China. The PLA Navy has a massive numerical advantage in hull count. They have utilized the tonnage trap, building ships at a staggering rate to overwhelm regional adversaries. But the Western plug-and-play doctrine nullifies this advantage. By pooling the fleets of the US, the UK, Australia, and Japan, and ensuring that every ship, sub, and jet can use the other sensors and ammunition, the West has created a massive, redundant, resilient superfleet. If Beijing wants to blind the US Navy, they can't just attack American satellites and radar ships. They have to attack the British. They have to attack the Australians. They have to unravel the entire interconnected web. The borderless Navy means that the supply chain is distributed globally. If an Australian frigate needs a specific radar component, it doesn't have to wait for a shipment from Sydney. A British supply ship passing through Singapore can deliver it. If a US submarine needs a Mk-48 torpedo, it can load it from an Australian depot. This is the strategic nightmare for authoritarian regimes. Authoritarian militaries are inherently rigid, top-down, and suspicious of integration even within their own branches, let alone with foreign nations. The Western Alliance thrives on delegated authority, shared technology, and decentralized logistics. By merging their industrial and operational bases, the Anglosphere has built a war machine that is too complex, too vast, and too resilient to be decapitated by a single preemptive strike. Beijing's strategic miscalculation. To truly appreciate the gravity of the British Navy's pivot to the Pacific, we must look at how it shatters the grand strategy of the Chinese Communist Party. For the last 20 years, Xi Jinping's military modernization has been aggressively focused on a singular objective: preventing the United States from intervening in the first island chain. The PLA rocket force built thousands of carrier-killer ballistic missiles like the DF-21D and DF-26. They built artificial islands in the South China Sea, outfitting them with long-range radar and surface-to-air missiles. This doctrine of anti-access/area denial, A2/AD, was brilliantly designed to make the cost of American intervention so astronomically high in blood and treasure that Washington would simply blink, allowing China to seize Taiwan or dominate the South China Sea uncontested. But this entire strategy possessed a fatal flaw. It assumed a binary conflict, China versus America. The awakening of the Anglosphere, spearheaded by the aggressive forward deployment of the Royal Navy, introduces variables that the A2/AD network was never designed to handle. When Beijing looks at the map today, they do not just see the US Pacific Fleet based in Hawaii and Japan. They see a British nuclear attack submarine lurking in the deep trenches off Western Australia, threatening their southern flank. They see a British carrier strike group exercising with the Japanese Navy in the East China Sea. They see Australian destroyers equipped with American Aegis combat systems. China's strategy relied on isolating their opponent. Instead, their aggression has achieved the exact opposite. They have catalyzed the formation of the most powerful, geographically dispersed military coalition since the Second World War. By waking up the Royal Navy, Beijing has forced itself into a multi-front naval war. They must now dedicate scarce ISR, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance assets to track British submarines in the Indian Ocean. They must plan for the contingency of European air power striking from Allied carriers. They must factor in the immense industrial capacity of the United Kingdom churning out munitions and spare parts to sustain the Pacific War effort. It is a profound strategic miscalculation. The CCP pushed the geopolitical pendulum too far, and it has swung back with the combined weight of the Western world. The return of the global fleet. In 1968, the British government made a historic and painful decision. Facing economic ruin and the collapse of the empire, Prime Minister Harold Wilson announced the withdrawal of British military forces east of Suez. The Royal Navy, the institution that had ruled the waves for centuries, retreated to the Atlantic, accepting a reduced regional role in the shadow of the Cold War. For half a century, the idea of British hard power shaping the destiny of the Far East was considered a relic of history. The events of 2025 and 2026, the deployment of the megafleet and the arrival of the Anson, marked the definitive, aggressive repeal of that 1968 decision. The United Kingdom is back east of Suez. But this time, they are not returning as an imperial power seeking to extract wealth. They are returning as an indispensable partner in an alliance of democracies. They are returning to protect the global commons, to defend the freedom of navigation that sustains the global economy, and to draw a line in the water against authoritarian expansion. The British Navy is preparing for a Pacific War because they understand a brutal geopolitical truth. In the hyperconnected 21st century, the defense of London begins in the South China Sea. If the rules-based order falls in the Pacific, it will inevitably collapse in the Atlantic. The Anglosphere has awakened. The Royal Navy has proven it can deploy its most lethal assets, from stealth fighters to nuclear submarines, across 40,000 miles of ocean. And they have proven they can seamlessly integrate those assets into a unified, unstoppable Allied fleet. If a conflict comes, it will not be a regional skirmish. It will be a clash of global systems. And thanks to the silent hunters in Western Australia and the massive flight decks of the Carrier Strike Group, the West is standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to fight as one. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Does the presence of the British Navy in the Pacific actually deter China, or does it simply escalate the risk of a global conflict? Should European powers focus on their own backyard, or is the defense of Taiwan a global responsibility? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay realistic, and we'll see you in the next one.